Cactus. Let's go.
We've got your wrestling, matchups, rankings, defeats. We've got your takedowns, upsets. Who won it? Who got beat?
We're Mike, Jack, and Mike. We've got those controversial calls. Top ranked challengers, but most of all, it's the best wrestling talk you ever
I think
heard.
Joey Blaze has upset potential.
We are Cactus Wrestling.
Welcome back to Cactus Wrestling. Today we have a very special guest here to talk about the monumental NCAA antitrust settlement that recently happened a few, months ago?
No, it was
At
weeks
this point,
ago.
weeks ago?
Literally a couple of weeks ago, like literally.
Yeah, it's pretty fresh in the pan. We have Mr. Dan Hanley. He's not a stranger to Cactus Wrestling. This is his third video, maybe?
Yeah, third.
Actually,
Yeah.
an OG, I would say. He's
Sure.
been around since the early Cactus days.
Yeah. For those who don't know Dan is a senior legal analyst at the Open Markets Institute. His research and writing focus on the relationship between technology and antitrust law, legal remedies, and political economy, and famously known for being the Plainville Invitational runner-up back in 2000 and I want to say 7?
No, it was 8. Oh, no, yeah, no, it was 7. It
2008.
was 7. It was 7.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, 2007.
No, it was 7, yeah.
You remember it was 7. How do you remember that?
What was
Yeah,
it cost?
December.
140?
It was a 2007-8 season, so it was definitely 2007.
Okay.
130?
Okay.
135?
135. He went down to 130.
135.
How do you remember this?
It's a hell of a
So,
battle.
I don't think there's to be
Yeah, that one was great.
to be clear. I don't think there's anyone more qualified to talk on this subject matter than Mr. Dan Hanley himself, from his work at Open Markets and his experience as a wrestler. So he has put a lot of work into this. We're very grateful for him coming on the show. He's got a nice little PowerPoint, and we opened up questions from the fans that we'll have him answer at the end. So Dan, go ahead, take it away.
All right. So, Jack's description was, really, really good. This is monumental. We'll get more into that later. Just obviously quick disclosures, just my personal opinion. They don't reflect my organization. This isn't legal advice. This is literally just my opinion. And this is from literally my, based off of my knowledge of this really important subject matter. All right. So the NCAA. So what is it? Right? I think that this is a question for people that we don't ask. We hear about the NCAA again. You guys are all, I think all of you are former college wrestlers. Mike, are you? Okay. But the NCAA. Everybody knows what they are. Like, everybody hears of March Madness and watches college sports. So they hear about it, but they don't. I don't think many people know like what the NCAA is organizationally, like as a corporate entity. Right? Like corporations, you don't just make a business, right? You have to get a charter. You have to there's a whole bunch of legal paperwork. But from an antitrust perspective, that paperwork actually matters. It matters a lot, actually. And basically, the NCAA is what's called a joint venture. A bunch of different groups, competitors, in this case, universities, get together and they centralize their control, their authority over this the athletes and the rules of the actual rules into a single entity. So how does this look in a diagram? This is my terrible, pretty plain, boring diagram, but it speaks for itself. You have students who attend universities, and these universities are members of these things called conferences. I'm sure some of you have heard the Power Five, or I think actually now it's more accurate to say Power Four, because I think one of the conferences only has like 2 schools, but nevertheless, let's just call them the Power Five. All of these comprise of the NCAA, and then the NCAA has rules that then govern what the universities and therefore what the students can actually do. I think this is actually a different description of what this organization is. So that was like the plain, vanilla corporate-esque description. I actually think it's better for our purposes to actually say, why is the House settlement so monumental and earth-shattering? I actually think the NCAA is an organized system of wealth hoarding and extraction. I know that seems like pretty strong to say, but I think it's pretty irrefutable, or at least
You
it
think
was.
it's wealth hoarding and extraction?
Yes, wealth hoarding and extraction. That's what it does. Functionally. And how does it?
Extraction of what?
Sorry,
Wealth.
what?
Extraction of what?
Extraction of wealth from, in this case, the actual people, the athletes that are creating the money, that actually create the entertainment that students of the non-athletes pay tickets for, or the TV rights, or that create the video games of college. That all those people who make college sports the actual events and the entertaining events that they are not getting the money that they're owed. So let's look at plenty of empirical research about the amount of money student athletes like produce. And like here's just one by two great scholars, Ted Tatos and Hal Singer. And they found that black football, men and women's basketball athletes at Division One at the Division One Power Five conference level have lost approximately 17 to 21 billion in compensation between 2005 and 2019, or roughly 1.2 to 1.4 billion per year. I mean, this is not a small amount of money that is not going to the actual individuals who are producing the entertainment. And not only are they not getting the money, they were categorically barred from doing so.
Who was getting the money?
What?
Who was getting the money?
What the? It's a great question.
The organization in general, I would assume.
Oh, well, I'll tell you who was getting the money because we have numbers on that too. Well, most of it, a large chunk, was going towards coaching and staffing, as you see here in the upper left. It's $4.5 billion dollars. So the total. So let's actually step back. Is that overall about $13.6 billion was generated in revenue from universities through the use of from college sports. And
in 2022 alone, right?
Yeah, 20. Yes.
Wow, just 1 year.
Yeah, these are these. I mean, this is a ton of money. I mean, it's hard to just even fathom. Yeah. I mean, I can't even fit 20 objects in my brain. If I try to figure out what is 20 individual circles in my brain, these are billions of dollars. And again, most of it going towards coaching, facilities. But you know who's not on this list? The actual students, the actual people doing the work.
Other expenses.
Of course, no. So this is not to say, sports cost money. You need arenas, janitorial staff. There's a bunch of people who need to be paid, right? And this is not necessarily saying that, or I'm certainly not saying, yeah, of course we shouldn't pay anybody. Of course, we got to pay people. People need money. The question is who is getting the money, and perhaps even more importantly is who's not allowed to have money, right? Because it's not like the students aren't just getting money because they're not demanding it. They're not getting it because they were categorically barred from doing so.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to.
Yeah, they're literally not allowed to. Obviously there was scholarships, there's meals and whatnot, but the NCAA also wasn't so generous.
Wait, were you saying that it was 4.6 billion in meals?
No.
That's how I would eat.
No. So again, why is the NCAA problematic? So one, if you think about that, if you go back to the chart, you have individual universities who are competitors, right? They're not just friends, right? Universities compete for talent. They compete to who to have the best players, to have the best team. When again, I'll just use my former my alma mater, UConn. When they win a basketball, a basketball championship for men or women, it's a big deal. The university goes nuts. Merchandise is purchased. There's parades. There's parties, right? And that's all great. And the university spends a ton of money on facilities and recruiting players and giving them scholarships, and that's all great. We want, generally speaking, it's universities should be competing. But in this case, for the NCAA, they're actually all agreeing and saying, you know what, we get to keep all the money, and the students don't. That's literally competitors saying, this is how we're not going to compete. We're not going to compete for how to pay students. So private actors are actually determining the rules of the marketplace. And just to say how again, from an antitrust perspective, how odd the NCAA structure is. Here's a quote from Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who's again a conservative of the Supreme, conservative justice on the Supreme Court. He said that the NCAA's business model would be flatly illegal in almost every other industry in America, and they would be. And fortunately, there's been a growing recognition of this, that of just how much control the NCAA has actually exerted. And here's just a brief history. I don't really need to go through this, but generally speaking, from 1984 really up until 2021, the NCAA had a de facto shield from antitrust liability. And this was based in an opinion in the 1980s where it was thought, if you read the opinion closely, this has nothing of the kind. It was grossly distorted. That the NCAA gets a shield from the antitrust laws because of its supposed unique organizational structure, and the necessity for the NCAA to actually collude, be the colluding mechanism for the universities. But in June 2021, there was a very important Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court basically said no, in very clear terms, that the NCAA structure doesn't shield it from liability. And then this really just changed the game in terms of people launching lawsuits against the NCAA. And for our purposes, really the House settlement really is the biggest deal of all the lawsuits that have been occurring. And again, just the tiniest bit of technicality here, the biggest defense, because if the whole point of the antitrust law says you can't engage in unreasonable conduct, well, what is the reason that the NCAA has said that they should be shielded from the antitrust laws, or that at least they shouldn't be, that what they are doing, restraining the payment of athletes, doing what they do, the backbone of that. There's been many other reasons, well, not necessarily to go on, but amateurism, the idea that not paying students creates a unique and supposedly desirable or desired marketplace for consumers. That's literally been the entire backbone. And so when they came out in July 2021 saying, you know what, we're going to loosen up our rules on what's called name, image, and likeness, and that's the ability to profit off of literally your face, your talents, what you look like, etc. When they reversed that, you could almost say, well, if you said that not paying students was the backbone of why you exist, and now all of a sudden you're engaging in a policy reversal, how strong was your argument to begin with? And a lot of people said, yeah, it was never really that strong. So now let's get to the House settlement. And again, I think Jack really hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's a big freaking deal. It's monumental, historic, groundbreaking, paradigm shifting. Insert the biggest adjective you can imagine. It really is. It's earth shattering how the function of how college sports is going to be moving forward. Literally starting today.
So Dan, this is currently in effect.
Yes. Well, it's the settlement is finalized, but there's additional lawsuits coming out of it. Again, we're going to get to that, but it's you could say it's on the cusp of being. Let's put it.
By the fall, the next
this
semester,
season, possibly. Like I said, we'll get to that. Okay. So again, 2020 they launched the lawsuit, and again they basically just attacked the NCAA's restrictions on name, image, and likeness. So now let's get to the settlement. And I think there really is no better meme that could possibly be better than this one. I think when you think of like people finally getting paid, this meme is just perfect. So if you want more details, and before I just continue to bloviate, this is the main website of it has court filings, it has really all the information that you could need. Goes well beyond what I'm talking about here. But I recommend to everybody just go there if you really want the details, the timeline, the court documents. It's just it's a good resource. So let's go into who gets what. So there is, as Jack said, there's direct revenue sharing from schools to athletes, which is great. People are going to start getting paid. The interesting aspect, which I'll explain a little later, is that it's a fixed amount of money that can go. And this is and so it starts about, again, rounding up $21 million per school per year. They can opt in. They can also opt out. There's reasons for that.
So wait.
Yep.
Every school is given $20 million or $20.5 million.
No, they can spend their money. That's their money.
They can spend up to that much.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's coming from like the athletic department budget or something.
Plenty of, yes.
That's not from like
Their
clubs
own,
or anything.
you could consider their own coffers, if you will.
Okay.
So that's the maximum that they can allocate.
Yes. And here's generally speaking how the money is going to be divided. And this is very important. Even though the students are getting money, they are not considered employees. This is why it's called revenue sharing, not a salary. I'll explain why that's important a little bit, but I want you to keep that in the back of your mind that the students are not going to be considered employees. They're going to be considered just athletes.
So is that like 5% to the team, or is that for each?
Oh, I think it's to the team. It's not to individuals. It's to individual teams. And this is, I think, and if I recall correctly, it's based on the amount of revenue generated from each sport. So everybody knows that the vast majority of money generated from, when we look at college sports as a whole, who makes the money, right? It's football and basketball.
Who has more like sports teams? It's the same pot that they're pulling from, as opposed to if it has less sports teams. So if like one school has 10 sports teams, one has 2.
Yeah.
It's divvied up. It's pulling from the same.
Yeah, but that's assuming that the school doesn't have to pay $20 million, right? That's just the maximum.
That's the max. That's right.
No, but I'm just saying, like,
it's kind of crazy though. I see what Mike's saying.
Regardless of the number of sports, it's the same.
Well, I can just see, like, looking at wrestling as your example of 5%. I mean, 5% of 20.5 million is like 1,250,000, I think, which is roughly what like one wrestler supposedly got for Penn State just last season alone.
Yeah.
So this is just from what the university can pay the students. So this gets to the other aspect is that, again, scholarship limits, and then there are endorsements. So now students are free to make money this is just from the NCAA.
Okay.
From who they are, their own name, image, and likeness. Now there is.
Wait, is the $20.5 million? Is that like the scholarship money, or scholarship money separate from that?
So my understanding is that it's separate. That this is just the money you can give to students for the performance that they are putting on. That if
there's 5% given, say they give 5% to a wrestling team, who gets to determine how that's spent?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is it the school or is it the coaching staff?
I think it's my understanding that. So I don't know the full answer to that. This is extreme. Like this is one of the other problems is that a lot of people are saying with all this, there's just so many decisions that have to be made. I've been reading some articles like from Sportico is one that's I highly recommend to people. That outlet has been following this very closely. Universities are literally scrambling to figure all this out. Like there is so much administrative decision making that needs to be done. Like schools are scrambling because of course it's a race, right? If you figure out I can pay my students this, I know how to do it, I have all the checks and balances in place, all the oversight, I could just start doling out cash and getting the best team possible. So it's literally a horse race. Like we're watching and it's happening in real time. This is I would actually go as far as to say we're building the ship even though the bottle it's already set sail. Like it's still being built. And it's like but we're heading towards whatever destination where like university staff is scrambling.
somewhat related question that you might get into. Do you think that we'll be seeing schools almost investing into like people like bringing in, financial analysts and whatnot to help kind of devise a better strategy so that way they can stay ahead of their competition?
Yeah, I do think that. I think there's going to be a whole
So some Jonah Hill from Moneyball action.
yeah, I was
Yeah,
literally going to
that's what
say,
I was wondering. Yeah.
Moneyball. I was literally trying to think like definitely some Moneyball-esque
Yep.
aspect to this. But again, if you think about that idea, it's that this is about paying students. Like that's really the end game is how do we get to pay the students that for them to come to the particular school. And for
Wait, go back a sec.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Is this college sports commission new, or is that something that's
Yes, this is a new entity. So what we don't want is so we want to keep track, or at least the settlement wants to keep track of who's getting paid what. In terms of for paying for
is
their
this going to be public information?
well, can I answer your question on what the College Sports Commission is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to get so it's basically an entity that tracks and the students individually is my understanding have to keep track a whole bunch of paperwork to keep track of their endorsements and whatnot. So this I'm jumping a little ahead, but name image the NCAA is not the only entity that controls name, image, and likeness. There is a bunch of there's state laws. So, like for example, forget the state. I think it's Brigham Young.
BYU. Yeah,
They're a university that has very strict endorsements. Like I don't think like alcohol for basically all students can't get an endorsement from a company that sells alcohol.
makes sense.
There's just companies that you're not going to be able to. So to make
Do they allow you to get endorsed by Cactus Wrestling?
If you want we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the opportunities here. This is a massive opportunity. But the general idea is we don't want pay-to-play abuses. We don't want people being pumped up or getting scammed or whatever it is. So this is sort of like just check, if you will, on the endorsements that could eventually happen. And for past players, this is about $3 billion that's going to go back to athletes.
How do I get on that? I graduated 2016.
So you should have received there's a couple ways how this works. So this is a class action. So it's a specific type of class action. And you are probably part of it, even though you don't know that you are a part of it. I do. You should check the dates again. This is why I would go back to the website.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a piece,
I need
of
to
$3 billion,
recoup on my $9.12. I can get paid from this.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I mean, this is. I encourage all athletes to again go to the college the website that I shared earlier and actually see if you're expecting money or. I think a lot of the filing has been done again, but we're still in like a sort of limbo period. And again, the reason why it's not. This is just the window that where student athletes will be paid.
Dan, do you know why they went with an 8-year gap like that as far as 16 to 24?
Stats.
I know of I don't know if you guys remember like Johnny Manziel and like Manziel Mania for this player from Texas was like he was the biggest name in college sports at the time and actually had a huge issue because he was monetizing his name through a friend and collecting a lot of money. That was like 2012 to 2014. Went to the NFL, ended up being a bust. But if this was able to get go back as far as 2012, 2014, I think this guy would be making a lot of money. This was, his face was everywhere.
So that specific year is based off of something called the statute of limitations.
Okay.
So, which is the idea that you can only go so far back in time for a company that becomes liable for whatever crimes they commit. They can only go so far back.
Okay.
So, like again, had the NCAA's amateurism model has been around since then. It's been around basically forever, but it really took a different form in the 1950s, and then in the 1980s there was like a radical change. So like you can't hold the NCAA liable for we're talking about 50 years. Like this is so this year is basically based on statute of limitations.
Okay.
So there are so there are problems with this settlement. This is not perfect. And I do think that for interest of most people would be interested in this. So I'll take some of it. Mike, you alluded to this earlier. Like, there's definitely going to be a drain on smaller school budgets. Like now that there's an arms race, you're basically unlocking all of this money that now can be paid, and you could see, smaller schools getting squeezed. Like they're just not going to be able to pay.
So this is a perfect opportunity for a fan question here, because this is
Yeah, please.
exactly what they were alluding to. Stetson Starkey, our boy from North Carolina, asks, "What's the end game? Have we already eaten the goose that lays the golden egg? And what does the landscape for wrestling look like in 2030? Is it just the same 5 programs and everyone else is irrelevant? If so, how long before schools like University of North Carolina just cut the program?"
Yes, I think that's a fantastic question. And so I think there's, so number one, I think that schools are going to have to do some serious rethinking on the programs that they value. And I do think though that it's one thing to say schools are going to get rid of all their programs. Is that likely? I don't think so. I think there will always be other sports programs because first of all, there are roster limits. Not everyone can play football, right? Not everyone can play basketball. Never mind, there's the Olympics.
Is the roster cap already in effect?
Yeah, my understanding is yes.
Yeah.
There's a new roster cap. I think it's up to 100.
30 for wrestling. 30.
Yeah, for football it's like 100 and something. I forget exactly. But so schools are going to have to do some reprioritizing in terms of value. But now that people can get paid, I do think that there's going to be a desire. Again, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but for like, there's really unlocking a capability here for athletes themselves, for promoters, for you guys to actually give attention now that people can earn money. It's that actually is now part of the game, so to speak. There are also other problems. I'll stick with this for a little bit, but then the short answer to the question is I think there's going to be a serious reevaluation of programs, but I don't think everything's just going to be obliterated. Like fans care about the Olympics is a big deal. Like programs are not just going to all programs are not just going to consolidate to football and basketball because they're like the massive revenue generating.
Back to his question, do you think UNC's wrestling program is in trouble?
Well, I don't know anything about that university's specific wrestling program, but I think let's look at this. Like if it really is football, basketball, and everybody else, right? That's generally.
Well, let's say here, UConn better than any other school because you went there. Say UConn had a wrestling team. We know they don't. They have a club team, but say they did. Would their wrestling team be in trouble?
I don't think so. I really don't. I don't want to speak for any I won't speak for my own matter because I haven't paid attention to it. But I'll say this is that I really don't think that we're going to see like this sort of decimation of college sports, that everything's just going to be football and basketball. Because now with people being able to get paid, you're unlocking opportunity. You're unlocking endorsements. You're unlocking you're
Where are they getting paid
operationalized.
from? Is it just the endorsements?
Wait, what?
Where are they getting paid from? Is it just the endorsements? Like
You can say
school.
or directly from the schools. You're
the
actually
school.
now talking about. So let's put it this way. This is the.
Didn't you say that it was limited to $20.5 million from the school though?
So, yes, but now you also have to fight for that amount, right? But that's just from what the schools can pay. That's
so
just
where's
aspect.
other money coming from?
Sorry, name, image, and likeness.
Selling their brand to be
Selling you the person, selling yourself.
Which can come from anywhere.
you get like
Generally speaking, within university rules and state law.
it could be like maybe like Joe's.
What this is saying, maybe I should. I feel like I'll be clear about this. What this settlement does is says the NCAA is not going to be the entity that controls name, image, and likeness.
So it's going to put the the weight of like, hey, like local businesses sponsor your athletes in a sense?
You can that now becomes a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's say you have a business, and let's say you have a boss that just loves wrestling. He hires wrestlers. He has a business that he thinks wrestlers have a certain not just work ethic, but a sense of a spirit, like a spirit that they have he likes them. They're good guys, whatever it is. His business can now sponsor a specific athlete. Let's say they're related, or they're a friend, or they whatever it is. That this now becomes an actual possibility. And so it's a real opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's more of an incentive for athletes to pursue the sport that, in this case, wrestling, to pursue college wrestling
Yes,
because now more than ever before, because they can actually get paid
yes,
regardless of where they go to.
yes.
I guess I have a question and I guess a comment, but um speaking of again UConn basketball, wouldn't this incentivize or kind of take away from smaller schools because UConn bigger school can pay more than like let's say a Central Connecticut State University, and so couldn't we see potentially a monopoly of talent at some point, which is kind of directly against antitrust?
So this is why this is why the roster limits are extremely
Okay.
that there is a fundamental bar. So a college can't just hire. So let's just see. So Harvard University has the biggest endowment, right? Let's say they have it's like $35 billion.
Yeah.
Let's just say Harvard wanted to, not that they would ever do. They're going to say, you know what? We want the single best football team
Get that
ever.
money can
We're
buy.
going to give everybody $100 million. Let's just say there was no limit on the pay. We're going to give everyone $100 million. We're going to hire. They can only recruit so many players. All the other talent has to go some. You think that there's no way that there's just a single team of great talent out there, right? Like there's much more talent out there. So the roster, this is why roster limits are so important. You can't just capture everybody.
I
Even
get
if
that
there
to
were
some
no.
extent, but to Stetson's question earlier, the top 5, 10 programs who have the biggest
That's it. That's
pull,
exactly what I meant.
are we
Mhm.
going to see those schools kind of,
Can get an even firmer grasp.
yeah,
They, they
like
could. So this is
like expand the gap?
yeah. But this is where advocacy comes in. That now there's pressure on universities to ensure they're not just putting all their eggs in one basket. There's democratic accountability here. Like you can't. I don't think. I think an unspoken uh, sort of control here is that sports teams now have to be their best advocates to the university staff that's controlling this direct pool of money. Um, you have to say that all that money shouldn't just go towards whatever it is, and not just football, basketball, right? That you actually deserve to pay other players from this pool of money. But this is actually a really nice segue into the biggest problem with this settlement is that it's this sort of constitutes wage fixing because
Mm.
you're saying you can only pay players this much money. Um, and so that's uh, and remember they're not in antitrust law. There's this thing called the non-statutory labor exemption, and it basically says that if you're not part of a union, these sorts of contracts affecting workers, in this case the students, don't get shielded from the antitrust law. So oddly, this lawsuit has already had additional, or this settlement has already had additional lawsuits challenging the settlement, like how this is actually going to work out. There's also Title IX issues with terms of equitable pay. Um, and
So
then, remember, these students are not employees, so that means like there comes. So this isn't a labor contract. This is literally the organization saying, "Hey, we're only going to pay you this much,"
so
so which constitutes a
say,
form.
say me, Mike, and Jack are on a team. Are we all getting paid equally?
Oh, so again, I think that's a lot of that's going to come down to university administrative staff in terms of who gets paid what. What were you recruited? Why were you recruited? Um,
Well,
there's
say
definitely going to be equity
if one of us is a
analysis.
starter, one of us isn't. Is that one getting paid more?
So,
It's
so
possible.
he,
It's
we have
possible.
we have
Like,
another fan question that I think dives into this topic. So
Please.
John S7077 says college athletes may earn compensation for the use of athletes NIL. However, that compensation must be commensurate with the market value of the athlete's NIL, although there is no specified manner to determine this fair market value. How would you suggest fair market value be determined in a fair and unbiased way in the future?
That's an incredibly important question. It's also incredibly difficult in the sense that so I think there's gonna be I won't give an answer, my specific answer, like because I don't really have one. But what I will say is that there is going to be, and I think this is where like advocates and students have to say like there's going to be accountability here. Whatever these variables are, they should be determined by athletes or in conjunction with the university staff. There should be an open policy that's clearly demarcated, that's clearly laid out, that accounts for both the students' intrinsic, their current talents, their future talents, their future, and that also gives, ensures equity amongst all the different players. This is really a values game, and I would say that it's up to individual athletes to be, I would say, being vigorous in their efforts to ensure that whatever that process is, because again, like I said earlier, the universities have to figure out so much stuff. They have to figure out so much, and making sure they're being held accountable, that this is an open process, that everything is clearly marked.
So who's in charge of regulating this? Is this the CSC that you were mentioning, or is it
so they only they help with this process. They help. I don't think it's just them determining what fair market value is. They're going to be an additional check, but there's also going to be university checks, because you can't just say we're going to throw it all to this commission and that's
is it the athletic director? Is it a coach? Is it the president of the school? Is it a new role that is now getting hired at every school?
That's what I figured with the new role.
A lot of universities are going to have to hire a bunch of staff to figure all this stuff out.
Which is going to...
Universities are scrambling to figure this out. This is really a new world.
The fastest growing career is out there in the universities for those of you looking for a job.
Getting back to the 13 billion you mentioned a few slides ago, I mean, that's going to be cut into now even more with expenses of having to hire new staff to fill these new roles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's the modern landscape. They have to keep up.
Yeah. There's a lot of compliance that has to go into it. And this is where the problems come in, right? Like there's state laws, there's university intellectual property rights. So like you are wearing like Binghamton's logo, right? Like you don't own that. That is not yours. Right? That's the universities. And if they don't want their brand associated, again, the compliance here is honestly, it's going to be nuts. And even on the students, there's taxes here. You can't just accept, $100,000 endorsement from Nike. Like this is, that's not, you don't, and walk away. There's a bunch of paperwork here, but I don't want to I know I'm sounding like critical. I hope it's clear that I'm very supportive of athletes. I want athletes to get paid. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure that's needed to actually comply.
Jack asked this is by this fall.
Yeah, but so there's a Title IX complaint, and my understanding is that the current judge overseeing the House settlement, has paused basically everything until the Title IX litigation is completed or it self-settles, because no one really knows how exactly this works into pay equity, which requires pay equity between gendered sports. But yeah, this is what, again, we're in this very weird period where so much has happened and even more is about to happen, and we're all just waiting for that one domino to fall. It's pretty nuts. So what's next? So what's weird is the NCAA is actually lobbying Congress right now for antitrust immunity. They know that this settlement doesn't shield them. That is not the end of their problems. Generally speaking, exemptions from the antitrust laws are a bad idea. At least I don't like them. We want we want the antitrust laws to apply. There are going to be additional lawsuits. The NCAA could try to restructure itself. There are different corporate forms. I've seen they could have like adopt a franchise model, which again, I won't go in the details, but antitrust law has a very weird relationship with franchises that actually shield it from a lot of antitrust conduct. I've seen that floated around. So like, what's next for like you guys? Like, there's going to be a mass attention grab. Like, I don't like. Let's look at channels like yours. Like, the ability to bring awareness to athletes probably matters more than ever. Like right now, because it can convert into real dollars. There's also going to be students I think are going to really create their own social media profiles. Like, that's now operationalized. If it wasn't already before, but now it really gets supercharged. Because again, it can lead to something. And this, and again, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself here, but like, this also creates niche market opportunities. Again, not football and basketball, by being as popular as they are, there's also so much you can do. Like, advertising costs a lot of money. Like, I think smaller sports are actually going to be unleashed because there are different marketing opportunities that actually exist now that didn't exist before.
So yeah, athletes.
Yeah, but to
You
play
wanna be
devil
on-
advocate, Dan, just because this for the smaller programs it's available, it's also available for the bigger programs.
Yes.
So they're going to be outshadowed by that. So they're still going to be playing catch up.
Right. I agree that this will put a lot of pressure on smaller schools. I don't think anybody can deny that, because you're unleashing a lot of money. This is why I think the NCAA needs, if I could, like, what's my solution? Like, if I could lay this, I would say you need the students to be employees. And then if they are employees, they now can form a labor union. And then they can negotiate how these payments are dealt out. And then the NCAA can literally, under the law, shield themselves from all their antitrust woes.
Just that, like, the NFL has the player union.
Yeah, this is exactly why, to what you just said. This is exactly why they have in the NFL. What's the salary cap?
Mhm.
That is a form of wage fixing. But why is it lawful? Because if there's a labor union, and under the antitrust laws, we give special protection for labor agreements. That labor conduct, again, won't go into detail, but is shielded from the antitrust law. So, but of course, the NCAA, if you think about when you become an employee, you're entitled to a minimum wage and benefits and all these other things. And the NCAA really doesn't want to do that. And they're actively fighting that in court. Again, I think it's Johnson v. NCAA. I forget where it was in my presentation. Oh yeah, Johnson v. NCAA is currently litigating whether athletes are employees under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's literally all I got.
Dan, we got one more question for
please.
what's next. This is KSIM 097. Pretty broad question, but what sorts of regulations do you think will be implemented in the next few years?
Concerning what?
General.
Concerning like the NCAA, or concerning how the athletes are?
Yeah.
How the athletes are going to be paid, if it's going to affect programs, what the schools are going to do.
It's so hard to say because there's so much in limbo, but I do think that Congress might have to step in on some level here. The NCAA is just a weird entity. It's, there's some sort of legislative solution might be necessary. I really would love to see a labor union. I think because then you're giving the athletes, and the reason why I like the idea of a labor union is it's the most democratic solution. You're giving the performers, the people who are creating the billions of dollars in TV rights and attention. It's literally driving all the news because everything's AI. Like, you actually get to see real people, put on a show. you actually are giving them a direct say in what the rules should be. So that alone, I would also, and again, it also again entitles them to uh, um, minimum benefits, and then you're actually giving a voice about what are the actual problems. Like, who better than to understand what are the problems with a system than the actual people who are experiencing the rules, the rules of that system. There's I think it was a very I know I had it earlier in the presentation. There was Shabazz Napier from UConn had like a quote that went like viral. He was talking about how he was going hungry, like because there was strict limits on food that universities could provide to their athletes, and then almost like immediately the NCAA like changed their tune. Oh, actually, there's no more limits. You can now pay whatever. No one should go hungry. Like the fact that even existed at all is it's immoral, but it's also like it just shows you how profoundly undemocratic the current system is. So I'm hoping that whatever system that we're going to approach is to be controlled by the actual or get input from the students themselves. I would like to see. I actually think that the best part about this settlement is the oversight. I do worry. I'm sure you guys are aware of. The sports betting is all the craze. Like right, like they're everything. Like we need some semblance of control over how athletes are getting paid, so ensure there's no pay to play. I think that idea of having oversight to making sure, okay, this is up to snuff. This is a legitimate endorsement. It follows state law. I actually don't mind all the compliance. And again, with compliance, I think which is an undervalued aspect of it because I understand how athletes may say, "Oh, look at all this bureaucracy. I just want money." And I'm sympathetic towards that. But the bureaucracy in a very weird way not just ensures that there's compliance with the law and hopefully students will get help with the taxes, but that this actually creates advocacy for who gets paid. That there's an element here where there's a system in place that actually incentivizes all of those interested parties to actually speak out about what's actually happening and what the rules of the game are. And that ultimately, in my opinion, leads to a much more democratically determined system. Again, we've lived under the control, the despotism, if you will, the really dictatorial control of the NCAA, the universities, the conferences, and how they get to set the rules over the athletes, really since, again, for as long as anybody can remember. And the change in the antitrust laws here, or at least as they apply to the NCAA, really indicate not only has there been a sea change in just the thinking of what the antitrust laws do, but from regular consumers and athletes saying, "Hey, this is like if you ever speak to an athlete, all of you, I'm sure have experience on multiple levels, like wrestling isn't just something, or for any sport, isn't just something they do. It's like who they are. It's like it's like a deep sense of enlightenment, fulfillment. They can't imagine they're not themselves when they're not doing this. And this whole name, image, and likeness, this whole lawsuit is really about like how you can make money off of that. And that to me speaks to a deep sense of like personal liberty, of saying that I should make money off of my talents, that my talents are actually valuable and should be valued, and can obtain value for myself. So I'm very curious. I know I've been talking for a while, but I'd be very curious to know like all of your perspectives on not just the lawsuit or just the paying of athletes. I come at this from a very narrow antitrust law perspective, but I would love to hear like actual athletes.
Well, it's a long time coming, especially for the football and basketball players who have been producing such a high income,
They've been
revenue
bringing a lot of money for
stream.
the school.
Yeah, they make a lot of money from the school, but they don't necessarily get to see it, any of that. I think wrestling's in a unique situation, especially for smaller programs, like Binghamton, for example, not necessarily like a top 30 school where the wrestling program doesn't necessarily bring in a ton of money. So from my perspective, it's like, oh, I don't really feel like I missed out,
Hmm.
but in the sense that, oh, the original Dick's Sporting Goods is in Binghamton University, and you could partner with them potentially and get an endorsement deal through Dick's Sporting Good, that type of thing. There's plenty of relationships, and I think it's on the athlete to be proactive to find these deals because I think they're out there, and plenty of other outside organizations are clamoring at the opportunity to get involved because it's the big hot button
Hmm.
thing
You
around town right now.
programs are going to develop
Say it
processes.
again.
Entire sports programs are going to I'm talking about the individual teams are going to form their own like committees. How can we do this? How do we spread awareness? How do we get endorsement deals? But and again, I want to say just a quick comment because I think your term like I didn't feel like I missed out, and I think this is so interesting because it's almost hard for you to know, right? Because the option wasn't there, right? And this is like this is why like the amount of money matters and why people feel like they've been harmed because this process of actually being paid, nobody knows because they weren't allowed to. You don't know if because let's take a hypothetical world where you were allowed to get paid what you are. Now you could say definitively, yeah, I missed out on X millions of
Well,
dollars.
especially John S. saying what's the fair market value. In my perspective, if you look at a wrestling team, you have 10, and this goes into like schools have 9.9 scholarships. How do they fairly allocate that towards the squad? Some people think, oh, well, there's 10 starters, it should be allocated to the 10 starters in some capacity. Well, that doesn't happen. I mean, from my experience alone, that's not the truth. Guys get recruited in based on high school accolades, and some guys get paid all 4 years without even starting once. And it's like, well, why am I a producer for this school not being paid? So that fair market value, it'll be interesting to see if that's like a school-wide standard of like every school has to adhere to this, or it's really up to the school by school basis to determine how that is. But I feel like that's an easy way to do it. It's just like, okay, allocate it towards the 10 starters, and then you have maybe incentives for performance. Like if you All-American or you're a national champion, maybe you get a 10% or 20%
And
boost.
as long as those rules got to be clear.
Yeah.
They should be clearly laid
But,
out.
but you know what the problem is, Dan? That it's not like that for scholarships right now.
Yes,
So I feel like it's not going to be the same for this.
yeah, but again, now that
It's all up to the coach's discretion on how they want to
yeah,
allocate scholarships.
now and again, this is why like for me, all I'm thinking about this is like from the labor perspective, the people who are doing the work. It's up to them to organize and pressure their coach to ensure if the process is transparent, the process is fair. Like there's going to be a lot of camaraderie that I think that's off the field, not just on the field of who's doing what, and I trust you that you're going to do or you're going to know what you're going to do. That there's actually off the field camaraderie that's now created to ensure that there's an element of fairness being of being that's happening here. It's I really think that this we're gonna see that at least I hope to.
I have several questions.
Ask away.
So first was I was having dinner about a month ago with a pretty big club coach in the tri-state area, and we briefly talked about NIL because one of his guys is being recruited by a few of the top five schools for wrestling. And he said, with NIL, he goes, I actually hope the NCAA dissolves and something better takes its place. Do you see that as a possibility at all?
There's yes, actually. I would say dissolves as it current in its current.
Yeah, in its current state.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's absolutely a possibility. I really do. Because there, like I said, this settlement doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't actually solve the problem because of how the antitrust laws are structured. it's again, you still have market actors telling, again, we're just going to call them what they are. They're workers. The athletes are workers. How much they can make and how they can make it without that being a result of, again, in antitrust parlance, it's like, or what's often quoted, it's like how it's determined by the market, that the market determines the value. And so yeah, never mind the whole host of other problems side. So yeah, the NCAA this is again monumental, transformative. Like yeah, this attacked the actual heart of what the NCAA is as an institution. But again, I think I don't. You sort of has to ask yourself is why is the NCAA even in this position? Like for me, like I understand controlling the rules of the game. You know, in wrestling, like what's the period structure? It's 2-2,
3-2-2 in college.
3-2-2. Like, oh, and of course that's different from Olympic wrestling. That's different from high school. Like, yeah, there's the same thing with college basketball, right? It's like 12, was it 2 12-minute halves or whatever it is.
Yeah,
like,
it's 48 versus 40 minutes.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I understand that there's rules of standard play. That goes with any, otherwise you wouldn't have sports.
Yeah.
Like you need you need an organizing body. But it's very odd the way, at least how I come through it, is that you already have state law. Because when you attend a university, you are controlled by them. So you have the university, you have like their moral codes, like their student code of conduct, right? Every student signs up for that. Then you have the state laws, which bind you through the university that you're attending, right? And now all of a sudden you have this third extra legislative entity that is on top of the universities that has somehow has a preemptory effect. It controls everything else. That just has always, and again, it has always rubbed the wrong way. And when you look at it from an antitrust perspective, again, bringing up Justice Kavanaugh's previous point, it's like the NCAA is just a complete anomaly. So, like, when you say it's dissolved, like, maybe we don't need the NCAA to exist in its current form at all. Like, let's question the premise.
When you talked about, like, I think this has been a long time coming. And I can even remember back to being a kid playing, like, NCAA football 2005. And I don't know if you guys remember that game, but, like, they had cameos of players where they're like, EA Sports is in the game, and they're saying the logo, and it's an unpaid college player. They had cheerleaders, and would say like, NCAA 2005, and like they were promoting this, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know athletes made like, as a kid, I'm like, oh, they must be professional. And an much older friend was like, no, like they're not paid, like they're amateurs, and I didn't understand it then, and as you talked about, like the NC kind of used that as a term to be like to protect themselves and really not pay players. I remember with Nick Saban, we saw this kind of changing of the guard with college football, where you had a program like Alabama that, Nick Saban was very openly against NIL, and it's part of why he retired. Where he's like, these guys shouldn't be paid, they shouldn't be doing this, and I always thought that was funny because you're talking about a team that's infamous for making back alley deals to buy players' houses, to buy players' cars, to buy all these things through a booster club so you can keep the talent coming to Alabama. Same thing we see with like Georgia and all these top programs. And now that other teams are able to legally pay players, he goes, well, I don't want to be a part of it because now the advantage I had is now lost. So I think this has been a very long time coming. I liked what you said, and you had the post up about, you're going to have to start seeing athletes really work their social media angle.
100%.
So there's a high school wrestler, Bo Bassett, who is got like between Instagram, Twitter, whatever his platform is, he has about 250,000 total followers, which for a high school junior is immense. Bo is so well known that many young wrestlers think that he's like this world champion wrestler. I mean, he has won a world championship, but they think he's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's obviously a very good, very talented young man. He's one of the top wrestlers in the nation, but he just lost a head-to-head wrestling match with another guy, Marcus Blaze, who is another high schooler, but is not as well known, especially in social media. And so what's funny is you'll still see the Bo Bassett brand, but then people are like, well, who's this Marcus Blaze kid that actually won the match?
Well, that was kind of like with Zepeda too.
Yeah. And I think that, you're seeing someone like Bo do it very incredibly intelligently. Market themselves, sell the brand. The results are going to be there regardless, but it doesn't matter as long as you could sell yourself. I mean, you could be a barely over 500 wrestler if you have people that are following you. I know of wrestlers that are frankly not great, and they have massive followings because they sell themselves incredibly well. So I think that you're going to see a lot of teams even say like, okay, this is our athletic trainer, this is our head coach, this is our assistant coach, this is our social media marketing coach. This is going to be like it's going to be a whole new role as far as teams because why would the school say, hey, I don't, we only have this finite amount of money, the salary cap you talked about, but we have, if you come sign, wrestle for us or play basketball for us or football, lacrosse, whatever, we have a top tier social media marketer who will help you sell your brand and you could make a lot of money that way to, not have to worry about our salary cap. So I think you're going to see a lot of schools creating those new roles.
Well, I mean, Caden Henschel is a prime example of that. He was a Division two guy who
Yeah.
has almost 500,000
Yeah.
YouTube
Incredible.
subscribers or something like that.
He's got a huge following, one of the biggest in wrestling.
Yeah. And I think you're going to see a lot of people try to mirror that and say, like, how could I monetize this if the school's not going to pay me? Because, we talked a lot about, NCAA's mostly people would assume this is Division One. Caden Henschel, as you guys just mentioned, is Division Two. I would have to imagine that because they're a Division Two school, they have less funding, less revenue coming in, so therefore they're able to, wouldn't be able to pay athletes as much. And so you have a guy like Caden Henschel who's able to market himself and say, like, I'm not worried if the school can only give me $20,000, let's say. I have built a brand that's worth millions. So very excited for the NIL era. I think we're going to see things get messier before they get better. And I am hoping that we start seeing athletes wear like NASCAR style jackets with sponsors where it's like, okay, your singlet has like the Hardee's logo and Subway, McDonald's, and you have like it's just covered you know, in your sponsorships. And I think that'd be a very fun way to do that.
What's so funny about what you mentioned about, with video games and whatnot, I didn't go into this in the presentation, but a really famous case that ushered in like the new era of antitrust lawsuits against the NCAA is this case. It's called O'Bannon v. NCAA. And that whole lawsuit, it was I forget exactly when it was initiated. I think it was it's late 2010s, early and early 2010s rather. And he initiated his lawsuit because he found that what was the game? It was an EA game. It was one of those EA Sports games that he was as a college basketball player.
Yep.
It's like, hey,
Yeah, the NCAA game.
but why am I not getting any money for this? And it turns out because it went, again, when you became an athlete, when he became one, you had to sign a contract that signed all of your name, image, and likeness rights away, which meant that you had no control over that. And again, if you think about how that violates a sense of like, how can I not be making money off of what I look like or my performance in this case, right? These video games, they're so specific on your chances of making a free throw or your chances of successfully making a pass in the video game, like all that's based off how the individual athlete like performed. Like they have all those statistics, like, and they worked into the model, like literally using you and your performance as a basis to sell a video game to the public, and yet you get none of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's like
Well, I remember
it's wrong.
I remember playing like, the early NCAA games again, and it didn't have player names on jerseys because they're like, oh, we don't have the rights to their names technically.
Yeah.
And now you have like EA Sports. I don't know if you follow like the Arch Manning issue where, originally he wasn't going to be in the college football 25 game because he said, I'm going to opt out of it. I don't like the deal that they're offering me. So I'm going to opt out. And he did decide to opt in eventually, but do we see that as a potential thing, especially if there becomes like a player union that players can do holdouts like we see in the NFL where they say, I'm actually not happy with the NIL deal I was offered. I refuse to step on the court, take a snap, you know, take the mat until I get more money. And because it's kind of towing that line of, is this a pro athlete? Is it a semi-pro athlete? It's not an amateur anymore, but what is it? Do we think that we'll see like, okay, we'll just go next man up? Or do we really believe that there's going to be power within that holdout for an athlete to kind of weaponize their name and say, look, I know how good I am. I know my worth. If I don't get my worth, I'm going to either transfer, um, or I will hold out until I get the money I feel I deserve.
And you know what's funny about transferring is that there's actually another lawsuit which the NCAA
Yes.
settled that was literally about the NCAA's restrictions on transferring. Um, and it was, I think it was like from 60 days to 45 days, and then it used to be a year. This was like nuts. And again, it's like the idea of it just strikes at the heart of the idea of like, how are these restrictions even allowed in the first place? And what they put students in an impossible position. If you don't agree to these terms, you don't get to play. And so what? So you it in this, and of course, like students are they're gonna sign because they want to play again. Like as I said earlier, for many athletes, this is like is a fulfilling experience for them, if they're scholar, or even if the most like transactional level, they need to do the sport because they're getting paid, their scholarship depends on it.
Yeah.
If we're just looking at that, very transactional way, of course they're going to sign away as many rights as possible. That doesn't make it right, so to speak. It's really violent, like personally violating in a way.
I have another question. So, as you may remember, in February 28th of 2025, the Kingda Ka was actually shut down permanently. With plans to possibly replace it, with something, as they've said, another multiple record-breaking coaster. What is your opinion on the Kingda Ka being closed? I know you are a devout fan.
I was devastated. I watched the video of it collapsing. Just for the background for the audience, I loved this roller coaster. I did, but before they blew it up.
Come back to Kingdom.
I have how long did we stay for your
Hours.
we were in that line for like literally like 2 hours.
Front row.
Yeah, and then we got the front row. I have like a very deep personal connection to this roller coaster, and then it collapsed. And I actually know, oddly, just to give a more serious answer to your question, it's partly because these roller coasters aren't family friendly. Like amusement parks now want to be more family friendly. That's why they're getting rid of them. It's still a sad day for roller coaster enthusiasts like myself.
As
I
good
was
as the,
devastated.
as good as the Kingda Ka is, there's one roller coaster that even beats it for me, and that's Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike at Universal in Florida. It's the same type of like, how you go like you cock back and then you shoot forward. There's like 7 of them
What?
in the
What?
ride, and it's not
Okay,
like a
that's pretty
tall
terrible.
ride whatsoever, but it just shoots you like, oh, it's the best roller coaster I've ever been to in my life.
Where is it? Universal Studios?
Universal Studios. It's Harry Potter World's Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. Best roller coaster I've ever been on.
Okay, well, I definitely.
On that note, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. I know it's getting late here. Dan, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
It's wrestling. What?
For commenters out there, feel free to give Dan a follow on Twitter at Daniel A. Hanley if you want to follow if you're interested in this kind of legal legislative type stuff, not necessarily NCAA or athletics specific, but just any antitrust matters.
Yep, that's my expertise. I'm also on LinkedIn, same address, Daniel A. Hanley.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you, all of you. I know this, because just to give the audience even more backstory, we originally planned this how long ago? Year? Or it's been a while, but
it was at least a year ago that we first pitched it.
And I think in my defense, I said then, as I said even 2 weeks ago when we planned this, that really everything before this exact moment really was up in the air. Like we are, and I do. Of course, there was back then when people were talking about this, like it's a big deal, but now it's like a real deal. Like that now we really have something to look forward to, and things are really starting to be finalized. So this really was an opportune moment to have this, and I'm very appreciative for all of you letting me on and let me chat about my expertise.
And
Thank
as
you.
always, thanks for watching Cactus Wrestling. Make sure you comment down below any other questions that weren't answered. We will text Dan
comments.
and get the answers for
You know
you.
what? I'm gonna track this specific video when
Oh, you might see Dan in the comments. Look
Does
at
that mean you
that.
don't track the
Whoa.
other videos?
When's the last time you commented on a cactus video? You have in the past.
Violating some law of nature if I wasn't a subscriber to Cactus Wrestling. I absolutely am, and I try to watch. I will say this: I listen to the episodes more than I watch. Because I can't always watch, but I can listen. But
I mean,
I will.
what's there to see? Mike Lawn's
I was about to say
disgusting
you should
chewing.
watch from yesterday when I was eating a bag of chips, and
Yeah.
today
Will
I
follow.
didn't. My wife made me 5 pounds of dinner. It's 40 meatballs, um,
Everything a growing boy needs, huh?
3 pounds of pasta, and I've
The
just been
next time
watching
I
it,
come,
eyeballing it from the side. It's sitting next to me.
I expect a delivery of said pasta for the next time I come on.
This
But
is
I will keep track of this video, and I will look for questions down below. And if there's any of them, I'll make sure I answer them.
Very good. Thanks for watching Cactus Wrestling. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. We are Cactus Wrestling, and we'll see you next time on our next video.